The CEO spoke in French to humiliate the cleaning lady, but her response shocked everyone. "And what about you? What would you do if you were ridiculed in front of hundreds of people, but had the chance to turn the tables?" Stay with us until the end of this video to witness this powerful twist. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any story that touches the heart. Night had fallen over the city of Newport, and the immense convention center gleamed like a crystal palace, its spotlights cutting through the dark sky. Inside, the Grand Hall of Summit International was already welcoming its most distinguished guests for the Summit Leadership Forum Gala, an evening of luxury designed to impress international investors. Massive chandeliers spilled golden light over tables adorned with rare floral arrangements, while violins played soft melodies in the background. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in long gowns exchanged formal greetings, raising champagne glasses that reflected the brilliance of the lights. It was more than a party. It was a stage play of power, wealth, and influence. Amid that atmosphere of sophistication, Maria Gonzalez quietly pushed her cleaning cart, dressed in a pale blue uniform that contrasted sharply with the grandeur around her. Her steps were silent, as if she wished to vanish into the glamorous crowd that completely ignored her. While waiters circulated with trays of canapés, Maria discreetly collected abandoned glasses and wiped small stains from the marble floor. Her eyes observed every detail, attentive yet serene. To the guests, she was invisible. But to herself, she carried the dignity of someone who knew her own worth, even in a world determined to diminish her. On the elevated stage, about to deliver his opening speech, stood Richard Coleman, the CEO of Summit International. With each step toward the microphone, his commanding figure drew looks of respect and unease. Tall, elegant, and confident, he wore the calculated smile of a man who knew all the spotlights belonged to him. For Richard, the event was not just a celebration, but an opportunity to reaffirm his authority before an international audience. His ego constantly sought small gestures to assert dominance, and that night, he would find in Maria the perfect occasion for it. What he did not know was that destiny awaited him with an unforgettable lesson, one that would forever change his vision of power. The grand hall of the gala looked like a living painting, a scene crafted to impress even the most demanding eyes. The soaring ceiling held glittering crystal chandeliers that cast golden reflections across the white marble walls. Tables richly adorned with silk tablecloths and silver cutlery were aligned in perfect symmetry, while waiters circulated with fine wines and trays of exquisite hors d'oeuvres. The classical music performed by a small orchestra completed the sophisticated atmosphere, creating a sense of silent power. For an outsider looking in, it was like watching a spectacle of luxury, carefully choreographed to reaffirm the superiority of the elite. Yet, behind all that beauty, there was also a sense of artificiality. Conversations were filled with polished smiles, but the eyes revealed competition and self-interest. Every handshake felt more like a strategic agreement than a gesture of cordiality. It was as if everyone there wore a mask, playing roles in a theater where vanity and greed were the true protagonists. Amid this silent game of appearances, few cared about what happened outside the circles of power. The setting was dazzling but cold, just as imposing as it was distant. It is within this contrast that the figure of Maria Gonzalez emerged, walking in her simple uniform among dazzling gowns and expensive suits. While the guests spoke of multimillion-dollar deals in various languages, she discreetly collected crumpled napkins, arranged chairs, and kept the floor spotless. To the eyes of the elite, Maria was merely an invisible detail, someone whose presence was only noticed when her services were required. But to the narrator who glimpsed her soul, there was a greatness in her that no one else could see. The greatness of someone who carried her dignity intact, even in a world determined to erase it. Maria Gonzalez was 42 years old, from a small Mexican town called San Miguel del Valle, where she grew up listening to her grandmother's stories about courage and resilience. When she arrived in Newport seeking opportunities, she found only invisible jobs, poorly paid and marked by social disdain. Even so, she embraced her routine with serenity, knowing that every penny saved went toward supporting the education of her daughter, Camila, just 17 years old. Her life was not made of luxuries, but of silent sacrifices, and that gave her a strength the hurried eyes of the elite could never perceive. Every step she took in the summit's grand hall carried a story of struggle, though few could ever see it. Despite her simple uniform and repetitive work, Maria nurtured a wealth no one could ever steal: knowledge. Always passionate about languages, she spent sleepless nights studying alone, using borrowed books from the public library and free videos on the internet. English had been the first, out of necessity for survival, but not the only one. Over time, she learned French, Italian, and even some German, keeping this talent like a hidden treasure. No one in her work circle knew about it, and Maria never felt the need to reveal it. To her, it was like a private flame, burning only to remind her that she still had dreams greater than the life she was living. Inside her existed a mixture of humility and pride. Humility in recognizing that life had given her fewer opportunities than many around her. Pride in refusing to let herself be shaped by prejudice or indifference. Although she carried the pain of an invisible daily existence, Maria always remembered her father's words: "Nunca permitas que nadie te haga sentir menos de lo que eres." That phrase echoed within her at every disdainful glance, at every stifled laugh directed her way. And on that night, in the heart of the Summit International's most luxurious event, she had no idea that this inherited motto would be put to the test before hundreds of people. Richard Coleman was the embodiment of power in Newport. Born into a wealthy family, heir to a lineage of bankers, he had turned Summit International into an even greater empire, expanding its business across 5 continents. Tall, with impeccably combed gray hair and a calculated smile, he commanded every room he entered. His gaze, cold and piercing, conveyed authority and a certain contempt for everything he considered beneath him. To Richard, life was a chess game in which only the most valuable pieces mattered, and anyone who did not contribute to his goals was easily discarded. His presence was like a magnetic field. It drew attention but also generated tension. And that tension was precisely what he cultivated, feeding his sense of absolute control over everyone around him. Despite his veneer of elegance, Richard was feared by employees and colleagues alike. His explosive temper, coupled with arrogance, made him a boss who confused respect with fear. In the company's hallways, stories of his public humiliations circulated in whispers, but no one dared confront him. He prided himself on speaking several languages, especially French, which he wielded as a symbol of sophistication and intellectual superiority. It was not uncommon to see him switch to French during international meetings, simply to test and embarrass those who could not keep up with his erudition. For him, this display was a subtle weapon to reinforce his dominance. He was a man who saw the weaknesses of others as a stage for his personal spectacle, convinced that he would never meet someone capable of turning his cruel game against him. That night, amid the glitter of the Summit Gala, Richard felt in his element. Every round of applause and every toast seemed to feed his vanity, reaffirming his belief that he was untouchable. His prepared speech was little more than a formality, for he believed his mere presence was enough to impress. Yet behind that rehearsed confidence was a man accustomed to flattery, but never to being challenged. And it was precisely this arrogance that would ignite the scene destined to change the course of the night. In the middle of a crowd that revered him, He was about to underestimate the only person capable of shaking the very foundation of his pride. The greatest irony was that, surrounded by world leaders, investors, and diplomats, it would be a simple cleaning lady who would bring down his wall of vanity. The moment for the opening speech had arrived, and the hall of the Summit Leadership Forum Gala fell into a respectful silence. Spotlights turned toward Richard Coleman, who walked to the center of the stage with steady, calculated steps. He adjusted the microphone, lifted his gaze, and began his speech in English, thanking the international guests for their presence. His first words were met with polite applause, but Richard wanted more. He sought not just to be heard, but to be admired, revered, and even feared. That was when his eyes scanned the hall and, at the back, he noticed the discreet figure of Maria Gonzalez, quietly straightening a few chairs near the side aisle. Driven by arrogant impulse, Richard broke off from his speech and decided to turn the moment into an improvised spectacle. He pointed at Maria and, with a smile dripping with irony, asked her to come forward. The gesture surprised the guests, who exchanged curious and even uneasy glances. After all, it was unusual to see someone from the cleaning staff called to the stage on such a formal night. Maria hesitated for a few seconds, but obeyed silently, walking toward where the CEO awaited her. Her heart pounded, and memories of other times when she had been exposed, target of ridicule or cruel remarks, flooded her mind. Yet in her eyes there was something no one else could see: the calm before the storm. When Maria approached, Richard leaned slightly toward the audience, like a man setting up a joke. Then, in a loud voice, he began speaking in French, choosing elaborate expressions that were difficult to translate. His intention was clear: to show the audience that the cleaning lady would understand nothing, drawing laughter at the cost of her shame. Voyons voir, mademoiselle, saves-vous ce que cela signifie? He said with a mocking laugh, while the audience followed the act. Some guests smiled discreetly, others looked uneasy, but no one dared to intervene. The scene unfolded like a cruel trap, engineered by a man accustomed to using power as entertainment. For Richard, this was just another display of dominance. For Maria, it would become the turning point of her story. The entire hall watched in silence as the unlikely scene took shape on stage. Maria Gonzalez, dressed in her blue uniform with hands trembling slightly, stood before hundreds of suited guests and journalists who observed every detail. Camera flashes began to fire, as if even the photographers sensed that something important was about to happen. Richard Coleman, meanwhile, wore a confident smile, savoring the employees' discomfort. He repeated increasingly complex phrases in French, gesturing theatrically as if he were performing in a play. With each foreign word, his intention was clear: to turn Maria into a laughingstock and reinforce his authority before them all. Some guests chuckled politely, unsure whether it was appropriate. Others simply watched, visibly uneasy, but unable to speak up. The weight of Richard's prestige was so great that no one dared oppose him, even in the face of obvious injustice. Maria felt every gaze on her, like blades trying to cut through her dignity. Within her, painful memories of past humiliations surfaced, moments when her voice had been smothered by shame. Yet alongside those memories came the echo of her father's words: "Nunca permitas que nadie te haga sentir menos de lo que eres." That phrase, like an invisible shield, held her upright in the face of cruelty. Richard, pleased with the cleaning lady's silence, took a step forward and turned to the audience. With a mocking laugh, he remarked in English, "Look, ladies and gentlemen, you don't even need a translation to understand the expression on her face." The comment drew a few scattered laughs, but it also created a palpable discomfort among the more attentive guests. Maria stood motionless, breathing deeply, absorbing every word as if carrying the weight of all the contempt she had ever endured in life. Yet behind her calm exterior, something had begun to stir. It was as if the public humiliation had become the spark needed to awaken a strength she herself wasn't sure she possessed. And while Richard believed he had already won this little game, he had no idea he was about to be surprised in a way he would never forget. For a few moments, the entire hall sank into an uneasy silence, as if the air itself had grown heavier. Richard Coleman's smile still lingered on stage, confident that he had turned the evening into yet another demonstration of his power. But at the back of the room, glances began to shift in different directions. Some filled with compassion, others with pure curiosity, and many with a growing sense of discomfort. The sound of violins had ceased entirely, leaving only the echo of the French words still vibrating in the air like a cruel challenge. Maria Gonzalez, standing still, seemed to absorb the weight of every gaze upon her. Yet her breathing remained steady, as though she were simply waiting for the exact moment to act. The cleaning lady's eyes, which until then had been fixed on the polished marble floor, slowly lifted and met Richard's. There was no anger in her expression nor shame, only a calm firmness that surprised several spectators. It was as if this woman, deemed invisible by all, had discovered within herself a hidden well of courage strong enough to sustain her stance before the crowd. The silence stretched on, building tension with every second, and even the most distracted guests realized something extraordinary was about to unfold. It was the calm before the storm, and every detail, from the subtle tremor in Maria's hands to the sudden spark in her eyes, signaled that the night still held an unexpected twist. Richard, unsettled by her lack of immediate reaction, raised his eyebrows and crossed his arms, as though to reassert control over the situation. His gaze sought to intimidate but instead met Maria's serene resistance. The audience, sensing the tension, stopped laughing and now waited anxiously for the next move, as if watching the climax of a play. Even the waiters froze mid-step, holding trays suspended in the air, afraid to miss the decisive instant. It was a moment suspended in time, when everyone seemed to hold their breath. In that brief interval, the balance of power had shifted, and though Richard had yet to realize it, it was Maria who now commanded the fate of the scene. Then Maria drew in a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and, before an incredulous audience, replied in flawless French, her clear and steady pronunciation slicing through the silence like a blade. Her words, firm yet elegant, not only proved her understanding but also turned the provocation back on the CEO, transforming humiliation into counterattack. Monsieur Coleman, it is not language that defines intelligence, but the way we respect others, she said in a serene tone filled with authority. The phrase echoed through the hall like an unexpected thunderclap, drawing astonished expressions from every face in the room. It was as if time itself had stopped, allowing everyone to absorb the historic scene unfolding before their eyes. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. People who, just seconds earlier, had been laughing quietly now stared in shock, some even with their mouths open in disbelief. The revelation that the cleaning lady spoke a language considered a symbol of sophistication shook the audience. A few foreign guests broke into spontaneous applause, unable to contain their admiration for such a courageous act. The contrast between Maria's simplicity and Richard's exposed arrogance grew sharper with each passing moment, creating a spectacle of reversed roles. The invisible woman, ignored for so long, had found her voice, and wielded it masterfully to expose the fragility of a man who believed himself untouchable. Richard, meanwhile, froze on stage. His smug smile vanished, replaced by a tense and bewildered expression. He had never expected such a response, least of all in the very language he used as a tool of dominance. The audience could see the unease on his face, and that detail only reinforced Maria's silent victory. Every second of the CEO's hesitation felt like a public defeat, revealing that true strength did not lie in wealth or status, but in the dignity of those who refused to be diminished. And in that instant, beneath the golden glow of the gala chandeliers, it was the voice of the cleaning lady that became the night's centerpiece, shining brighter than all the luxury around her. The entire hall erupted in unexpected reactions. The heavy silence shattered into applause that began timidly but soon spread in waves, swelling until it filled every corner of the grand space. Some guests rose from their chairs, clapping with enthusiasm, while others raised their phones, eager to record the moment, fully aware they were witnessing history. Journalists wasted no time, turning their cameras toward Maria to capture the instant when the invisible woman became the protagonist of the evening. It was as if everyone had awakened from a trance, finally recognizing the greatness that had always stood before them but had long been ignored. Maria remained composed, neither smiling excessively nor boasting, maintaining the serenity that defined her. Yet her eyes revealed restrained emotion, a spark that reflected years of silence transformed into a single moment of courage. Around her, some foreign guests exchanged looks of admiration, whispering in their native tongues about the cleaning lady's unexpected eloquence. It was impossible not to be moved by the turnaround. A simple worker had, with only a few words, torn away the mask of arrogance from a man who considered himself untouchable. And that night, in a hall filled with the powerful, it was Maria's dignity that shone brighter than any crystal chandelier. Richard, on the other hand, struggled to compose himself. His once proud expression was now marked by humiliation. With every clap directed toward the woman he had tried to ridicule, his ego crumbled further. The CEO attempted to force a smile, as if to downplay the situation, but it was far too late. The audience had chosen a side, and his authority seemed to dissolve before everyone's eyes. For the first time, Richard Coleman was not the center of attention for his grandeur, but for his silent defeat. And what made it all the more devastating was the realization that he had been bested not by another tycoon, but by someone wearing a simple cleaning badge. The Summit International Gala would never again be remembered for its luxury or for the speeches of powerful executives, but for the moment when a cleaning lady refused to be diminished. After the initial shock, the applause swelled into a standing ovation, as Maria received looks of respect and admiration from every corner of the hall. Meanwhile, Richard Coleman stood frozen, weighed down by the exposure of his own arrogance. In that moment, no fortune could restore the prestige he had just lost. The lesson was clear. True power does not lie in money or social standing, but in dignity and the courage to confront injustice. Maria, however, was not seeking to humiliate or defeat anyone. Her gesture was not born of vanity, but of affirmation. She knew her response would not change her work routine the following day, yet it had changed something far greater, the way everyone there would see the invisible people of everyday life. With just a few words, she transformed an act of cruelty into a symbol of resistance and inspiration. Many who witnessed that night would carry the memory with them forever, retelling not the story of a CEO who shone at a gala, but of the humble woman who dared to raise her voice and astonish the world. As she stepped off the stage, Maria walked with firm strides, carrying not the weight of shame, but the lightness of someone who had earned genuine respect. For her, the victory was silent and intimate, but for the audience, it had become an unforgettable spectacle. The image of the cleaning lady answering in flawless French would echo through newspapers, social media, and the memory of every guest who attended that evening. It was the triumph of dignity over arrogance, of simplicity over excess. And for those who watched, one powerful message remained: never underestimate someone based on appearance, for a person's true worth goes far beyond what the eyes can see. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos, and of course, leave a like, because that helps a lot in keeping this channel alive and bringing you more stories that move and inspire. Thank you so much for your support, always.